realistic bandwidth of basically surviving. So it's seen in babies and maybe people with high degrees of mental illness or early hunter-gatherer societies, first when humans were kind of coming online there. And then that eventually moves into tribes of very small people, but the tribes begin to have, it's not individual consciousness, but it's kind of a group consciousness at an early level, not too different, let's say, from a pack of animals. And you have shamans that kind of arise in the purple realms, leaders, different roles. And then at some point, though, the next level up from that would be the red level. And red would be the power at all costs. This would be the emergence of, the ethos of dictators, of warlords, of, you're going to find this in certain cultures like spiral dynamics teachers would talk about prison cultures as being red. And it's kind of the mafia gangs, where there's a tight group, but it's strict hierarchy, and there's going to be a king on top, always male, usually, and it's going to be where kill or be killed, and the king will always be deposed because there's somebody below them always wanting to overtake them, but it's violence and all of this stuff, and we are fascinated by this. Like the Narcos, the show on Netflix, Narcos, and all of that would be very red, and we love it for entertainment. But the problem is that you can't really form civilization from that kind of heavy-handedness, because eventually people are going to get tired of being killed, and and so that moves into this new level called the blue level. And blue level is home to where most people, I would say the greatest gravity of people, are finding themselves in the blue ethos. And this is where it's real important to understand what I think is going on religiously. And it's been helpful for some of my clients to understand that maybe while their family understands life from a blue level, they might be moving into the orange or green, which are even higher, and so that there's a real conflict. But because this is where a lot of the religions emerged. It started about 5,000 years ago, and this is the civilization, agriculture. You have specialties, and you have religions start to really emerge and take hold. Doctrine and dogma is very important. And God is understood as out there. We are here. God is always male, in the blue conformist culture. And it's a very safe place to be. Spiral dynamics teachers call it the happy blues. Because when you're in blue, man, it's just so comfortable.
Because you're right, and everybody around in your little group they're right. They've got the truth.
God is on your side.
God is rooting for your team.
That's right. And blues will fight other blue cultures, because my God is right, your God is wrong, and it's absolute loyalty to not just the king or the leader, but it's loyalty to the whole culture. The whole religio culture, So this is where nationalism is kind of coming from, and all of this stuff. So a lot of religion, especially institutional religion, is going to be very blue. And that's not a cut down. That just seems to be how it is. Blue has strong understanding of what would be heretical. And heretical would be to not question what the doctrine and dogma is, because this is how it's always been. This is how God gave it to us. So you cannot challenge this. And so oftentimes blue will use shame and guilt as tools to demand conformity back into the group, or shunning once it doesn't. Once you've said I'm done here, then they'll shun you. So we cut you out of the group. But again, inside the group, it is very comfortable. But what happens when you've got two groups together, two blues, and then this place in between, the frontier, then that can't fight always. So you end up having a new culture that forms in the frontier. Frontier cultures can be a little bit more advanced in a sense, because they're a marriage of two different groups. And the frontier groups start to see, they start to have a different value system. And that value system is, well, all right, you can believe what you believe, I believe what I believe. Maybe there's something, maybe there's not, but let's do what works. So this is the birth of the mindset of efficiency and science and enlightenment, not in terms of like Buddha enlightenment, but enlightenment of the age.
Right. Scientific enlightenment, yeah.
Yeah. Progress, capitalism. Let's grease the wheels of stuff, and let's make life happy here. Blue is very, very comfortable about you live your life sacrificially now so that you can go to heaven and be with God then. Orange, which is the next level up, is sort of seeing, let's enjoy life a little bit now. Let's create some things here so that we can, make it nice. But you also have this preference for rationalization and experimentation. So it's very needed. It's a good thing. But it has its very big shadow sides. And every level has its own shadow sides. And that's the shadow sides actually are what fight each other. So each group will only see the shadow of the other group, whether it's the group below you or the group above you. And when you see the different levels, the ethos of the different levels, you either think, if they're above you, oh, you were aloof, you're wrong, you don't know, you're a heretic, and so they attack you. Or if you're below, oh, you're a knuckle dragger, you don't know anything, you're ignorant. So they always attack the shadow sides of the different levels. But eventually, Orange starts to see that their exploitation of the planet or of other people is actually really problematic.
And in seeing that, they shift into green, right? Yeah.
Green. And green is the level, and I would argue that this is when really the heart chakra starts to really open up in more of an activated, stable state, or stage rather. And the green starts to look at ecology as important. It's a greater understanding of the social inequities that are out there. And it's sort of the birth of social justice understanding and so on and so forth. So what you have right now, as far as I can see, in our political sphere, is you have a lot of people who are in blue who hate green because they see the shadow side of green. And the shadow side of green, though, is there is no truth. See, blue there's absolute truth, and we know it because God has given it to us. Green, which has already gone through orange and back into green says, all of the belief systems can be challenged scientifically. And maybe there is no such thing as absolute truth. And so from that perspective, you end up having a skeptical mind where you're just skeptical about everything. So it's kind of the liberal who is always against everything. Like, what are you for? They can't really tell you what they're for. They're always against everything. Oh, that wouldn't work.
What I find is a lot of times there's scientific types who would consider themselves to be green. There's no absolute truth and this and that. And yet they become fundamentalists in their scientific understandings and refuse to even consider things that are outside of the box that they're comfortable in. So I don't know how you'd color them, but there's a lot of that. There's this sort of materialism and scientific dogmatism that in a way seems to retard the progress of science, although I realize that some of that is necessary for stability.
Yeah, and a lot of people would put that as an orange thing, that the scientists that are dogmatic in that way would just be really orange, right center middle in orange thinking. And it doesn't mean that if you're an orange, you don't believe in God or anything like that. But I'm saying that inability to respect or honor anything that's transcendent to what you can physically measure, that's orange thinking. But green is starting to sense that there are larger realities and that there's inequities and things like that. So I talked about the happy blues because it's happy to be in blue, but green, they're actually called mean greens. And because there's this sense of, it is a liberation because you are fighting for justice and all of that stuff. There's a liberation, but on the other hand, it can be marked by a lot of against or conflictual energy. What are you against? And let's fight for this, and let's fight for that. And so they can be kind of mean in a way they approach the other systems, elite, if you will. And they're criticized by everybody, let's say, below them as being just that, elite liberals who don't know crap. They're hypocritical and, all so on and so forth. But here's the thing, and this is the last piece I'm going to talk about on spiral dynamics because it's super important. There is all of what I've just described is the first tier that contains these different levels. There's a second tier that is above that. And the gap in between the first tier and the second tier is so difficult to overcome that only about maybe 5%, 8 to 5% can get there. But that's where we want to get.
Is that where you get into yellow, turquoise, and whatever? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to describe yellow importantly because what happens with green, the area where they start to transcend into yellow is when they begin to realize I am not necessarily agreeing anymore that there isn't such a thing as truth. Everything is not relative. Maybe there is such a thing as a hierarchy of truth, but all truths can be true for that particular bandwidth of consciousness, but maybe they belong inside a nested Russian doll, as we talked about earlier. And also they start to reevaluate all of their belief systems that have gotten there. And it's very difficult because it requires a lot of dark night of the soul, that liminal space that we talked about. But when somebody merges into yellow, they see the world again with new eyes. And this time, this is the really neat thing about yellow, and this is where I think we need to get everybody, if we can, and shows like yourself actually doing this, is it's helping people to realize that all of the levels below belong. That you can't get to the 100th floor without having the 99 below and a really stable, strong foundation. And yellow can hold paradox. It's really the first level that can hold paradox together. And they don't necessarily ask what is right and wrong in terms of the blue moralism. They're asking about what works so that everybody can enjoy and realize this freedom. And they start to also organize companies, they organize universities, different things, so that there is an integral approach that combines all holistic aspects of things, not just one thing, but it's a holistic aspect. And it is fluid enough to say, well, maybe for person A, this needs to be emphasized, and this other aspect, this other part of the holistic aspect can be help, to support the main thing that needs to be emphasized. But in person B, maybe it's the complete reverse. There's not going to be one prescription that matches everybody. And yellow is really, really interested in helping people meet them where they're at. So they're going to meet somebody who's blue. They're going to learn how to, let's say, put on that archetypal energy, that mindset, talk as blues, use the vocabulary, blend in, because blue is not one to be, let's say, shamed and saying you're horrible, but rather validated for the truth that it is. But then if you're a leader, you guide people to start asking open-ended questions of other things that they haven't considered for their own movement forward. And that can help them move into orange or move into green. So you end up being able to blend in with any of the types, match the energy, not to dominate, but to serve their highest good. An example is, if I'm teaching somebody spiral dynamics, then maybe they're a green thinker. They're really into social justice and all this stuff that I love too, but they're always really, really angry, and they hate their family, and they hate all of things that's not in their little paradigm of what reality is. And so they're miserable because they're feeling anxiety, they're feeling depression, they feel isolated, all of these things. So we will explore what yellow looks like. Try it on for a couple of weeks. What does yellow feel to you? Get to know that bandwidth. And then I will ask them, okay, so what you've just said is a very green statement. Maybe they said a very green statement. Now I'm going to ask you, what would your yellow self say to your parents? Or if you're in that dinner place with your parents or family and there was this conversation, how would your yellow self respond? How would you feel if you were able to hold paradox there? Could you affirm them in something and then challenge them compassionately in this?